The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Guess what? Welcome back to David Mackey's. That's my COVID getting away from me. David Mackey's Shiny Set Out on freedomslips.com. What we're going to do is ask you to get some merch from the station's website. I don't care what it is. The simplest thing is enough. Get yourself possibly a t-shirt or mug. They're really cool. I made my own, so if you want to use the design for Revolution Radio for Shiny Side Out show, then you can get that through shinysideout.com.au if you want. Or .net.au, I forget what it is. Have a look for Shiny Side Out. It should be pretty easy to find. There is a call-in number that's available. Now, it used to be 347-688-2902, but there are alternatives. I'll see what I can find while I'm bringing it up. Yeah, so I've got this is +1 depending on what country you're in. If you're in the US, it's 347-688-2912. Yeah, that's right. I was right. It is 10 greater than the station's number. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So you can call me in on that. I would prefer that before you called, that you messaged me in the chat room at the station's chat. So on freedomslips.com, you can go to chat room and you can message me. I'm on air. I'm here in the chat room, and say, you know what, I'd love to join the call, and this is my ID, and I'll make sure that I can receive you that way. All right. So go about doing that. Oh, goodness me. So what I did at the top of the hour, but I'll keep going. So, yeah. So let me say, you're back with David Mackey's Shiny Set Out on freedomslips.com on the #1 listener supported talk radio on the net. So you can push the donate button like I've already suggested, or subscribe to the archives. Now, the subscription now is zero cost, $0. Binge what you want, and if you like anything at all, make sure that you attribute that in some way monetarily. Please do, because it helps run the station. The servers aren't free, they're clouded, so there's a cost to all of that. There's licenses for the software, and there's a bunch of people who do this for the love of doing it. Now, Mecky and I are in that final group, and if you'd like to also become a patron of ours, you can, or the station, that's fine. Either way, do what you need to do. But I'd like to say hello to everyone who's new, because you might be listening to this for the first time. It might have fallen into your lap. You might have been shared by a family member or a friend of yours. And look, thank you very much. And don't forget, you can reach out to us. You can comment in the video on YouTube, or you can message me directly into the chat room and do that, because it's really interesting to be able to talk to people. And if you have a point to make, or even if you dispute what I say, I'll reply. But be genuine, because otherwise I'm not going to feed the trolls. If you just tell me I'm wrong or you hate me for some reason, good luck with that. You can just move on. I'm really tired of having to deal with that. In the book I wrote, I was told I was wrong, which is impossible, because the people who told me I was wrong weren't there. I was there and they weren't. Anyway, we're halfway through show number 541. As Becky would say, 141. and 500. And we're currently talking about whatever comes to my mind. So I threw a suggestion into the chat room for someone to let me know what they would like me to talk about. And in this backwards and forwards reactionary kind of new wave thing that we have today, Amiga Logos says the secret war between the alien and Bigfoot, hence explaining the seeming absence of either of them. Now, I really like that. That's great. Because I can talk to you a little bit of this. Not very much, but enough. Now, there have been an overlap when you look at the data. If you're only looking at data of Bigfoot sightings, and I'll get to the show called Finding Bigfoot a bit later. I'm not going to make people drink a shot of alcohol. Nobody, by mentioning those words there, not yet at least. Now, Finding Bigfoot has had, was it 9 seasons or something, and more. So tremendous is their following that it just continues to grow. I haven't heard that they've been cancelled yet, but so far in the 9 seasons, they haven't found Bigfoot. They've reacted to a bunch of stories, which is good. Some of those are very compelling, but compelling isn't the evidence. They've found strands of hair which have not turned out to be Bigfoot. A lot of footprints. That's good. They've in the latter part of their series arcs, they've done lots of tree knocking and calling. Found a lot of coyotes. But one thing that I've noticed that they've not done so far, and I'm not giving them grief about it, but they've not found a Bigfoot, and that's a little disappointing because I followed the show for a long time, and now I don't have the platform that allows me to watch it any longer. So that was for me Foxtel. I know they're on Foxtel, and I don't have that anymore. So sadly, to those creators, I'm not there. But they're in countries all around the world. Bigfoots or hairy man, or the small orange hairy dude in Indonesia. In Australia, it was the Yowie or the hairy man. There's even the crying mother in Northern America, just below the Canadian border. They're in, I think, is it Washington State, or not Oregon, Washington State, yeah, up there. There's people all around the world, native people who have stories about these creatures that appear and disappear, and and they are and had those stories before popular culture. They had them then. Was there a real race of humanoids, pardon me, who resembled them, and who, not saying that they're Bigfoots, that they're, but rather, like Australopithecus or Florensis or what have you, some Homo sapien, not necessarily sapien. Maybe they. So Meki and I have talked about this a bit, and thought whether there was another one we haven't found yet, one that's maybe a little more seclusive, but still shy. Is it possible? Well, it's kind of possible, but we've also kind of been everywhere. Almost. Yeah, there's some deep, dark jungles where we haven't been everywhere. But it kind of lends itself with all those stories, by the way. And there was some interesting published in the newspaper stories before we even cared what a Bigfoot was. It was named in Australia. Down in Tasmania, there was a hairy man sighting that occurred very frequently where it would steal food and then disappear again. And it was seen a number of times. And they put out like a posse to try and find it and hunt it down. They didn't find anything. But I can just hear people say, well, it could have been anything, or it could have just been the guy that ate all the food said that, you know, this hairy man kind of came and took it all. Maybe there was really a hairy man, right? Maybe it wasn't a Bigfoot. Maybe it was just a really, really super hairy dude. Is the hairy man a werewolf rather than being, you know, a yowie or a Sasquatch? Who knows? You know, these forests are a bit squatchy. Knocking on a tree is interesting. That could be a warning. But one thing that I found that was, I think the purpose of the call was neglected. In saying this was from Finding Bigfoot, and it was my only criticism. Only criticism is that you might laugh, but my criticism of the show was that they were using a call that they believed was a call to announce their presence, right? Maybe like saying hello, but rather than, danger, run away. They've found that birds' tweets can, when a bird is in a tree and there's one on the ground and one's a lookout, it will call out a specific call to warn the one that's on the ground that there is a predator, or you could just say danger. Now, was the call that they were calling out the call for danger, therefore the reason why they never saw any? Because that always has me. If you only ever heard the story about a single exclamation from a human, if you were another species, and then you called that out perfectly, oh my goodness, in the right language, using the right inflections, to a group of humans, they would all be alarmed and run away. You wouldn't end up seeing them. If there isn't a word that we know of in the Sasquatch language that says, I'm friendly, come here, then why are we yelling out the warning symbol, the warning sign? So that's what always annoyed me about the show, is that they would do these calls and then suddenly everything would go completely quiet. Even if they did hear something walking in parallel with them down through a mountain, if they camped out. Look, that's one thing. So I'm going to park it right there. The other is aliens. So, if I asked the question to anyone on Earth, their answer can only be, this is the question, the answer can only be yes. Would there be life elsewhere in the universe? Not is there, would there? Given that is the answer, that a regular, sane person not worried about themselves or any threat to their thoughts or religion or belief systems or anything like that, not even the worry that science will get there or caught up or anything like that, and not even those who believe that we've already been visited, just simply, would there be life elsewhere in the universe? The universe is such a vastly large place that it would become impossible for there not to be. Even if it was 100 billion, trillion, gazillion to 1, there would still be life out there. The number's startlingly large. Now, the seeming absence of aliens, it's a great point. So, would they talk to us? Unlikely. Would they come here to observe us, or would they already have been here observing us? There are tales about the Watchers in the most ancient of human texts. The greatest age document that we have is the Sumerian text, which does describe there have been beings that created humanity. That's non-disputable. It's in the text, and it says they came here, and it's like it was narrated to them, like you're a stenographer in a courtroom. You know, the funny typewriter thing that they have. So, like you're a stenographer, and you're just basically taking down someone's narration. That's what the Sumerian text is all about. And that they came here and made the black-headed ones, and they were, because the humans, the first lot of people they made, the people they brought with them, called the Igigi, complained about the toil and the hours and the work. And well, if you were a spacefaring race and your people were only meant to serve you on board a spaceship, and then to come here and then they're serving you meant you've got to dig, rivers and canals, and there's all too much toil. And of course, that's what it says in the text, that they complained about it. And then they went, oh, well, we'll make another race of people then, right? Yeah, cool. What's around on the Earth? Chimpanzees or whatever. We're going to modify the DNA, and using parts of the Earth and our spit or whatever, because we know today that contains your DNA, we're going to join all that stuff together in a mechanical womb, and we're going to make humans 7 male, 7 female, let them go and they can breed up, and then they should make a reasonable population in which to do the toil that you don't like. So there are a ton of people that believe that, and or believe that we've been visited. Since then, there are discussions in the world's military that these things are in the sky or in our airspaces, collective airspaces or independent airspaces, and that they're really not here to hurt us. Because if they could, they would have done that a long time ago. The question is, are they, bad? Are they bad to us? Maybe they've got really bad intentions, or maybe they're just here to observe us and radio all that stuff back to from whence they came, I suppose. Maybe their origin planet is destroyed, and all they've got now is what they brought with them. I can hear a military helicopter going over the top. I'm beneath the flight path of the military helicopters when our Australian elected officials wish to go to some place to observe it. So if we have disasters, they fly from Canberra to Williamtown Air Base, and then from there to across Australia in their own flight, in their own for their own purpose. Anyway, so they take this flight path, and I can to the day tell you where, a couple of days later when they release the information that someone went somewhere, that I can always say that was I heard it go across when I go over my house. So anyway, is there a secret war between the aliens and the Bigfoots? Are Bigfoots simply just another alien race, kind of like Chewbacca was? Is that what's going on? There have been an overlap of sightings of UFOs and Bigfoots, but because the databases aren't the same database, they're two separate databases, because the people that follow these specific phenomena are separated from each other like silos, that the databases don't merge together. There was some research done on the missing persons of someone, and a fisherman had spotted lights in the sky and reported those lights in the sky, but from the other side of a mountain, wasn't aware of what was happening on the other side, just kind of, reported those lights. And on one side, a family was missing a husband who'd set off on his quad bike, took off all his clothes and folded them neatly, which is usually the sign of a suicide. And then the body was found later with a crushed arm, naked, well further up the hill, but with a crushed arm for some reason, which didn't make any sense. There was no, handprints or any mechanical blunt trauma, except for a crush injury. And very strange, just extremely strange. Upper left arm it was that was crushed. But having said that, the people who have done some research have found some overlap. They're saying it's overlap everywhere. And yes, that would probably not be statistically significant anyway. But look, each to their own within their own silos. And if all of this tended to be kind of like Predator, where the Bigfoots were either underground dwelling, kind of apey, human-y kind of things from an ancient lineage, or even visitors whose cloaked technology allowed them to appear and disappear and go about their business. Maybe they just come here for hunt games. And that's all they do. Like as a few Star Trek episodes suggest that that's the thing. Or even Predator, the movie, for instance, he just comes to hunt stuff and then disappears again. If that was real, not Predator, but if this concept that they only come here to hunt, that's probably why we could never find a house or an underground, footprints of significant size enough to suggest that they were going in and out of a cave. That kind of makes sense, but then it places everything else in some kind of really weird position where all of the thoughts had been that they are inhabitants of Earth, but maybe it's not. Just maybe. Maybe they just visit here. I think it's a really interesting thought. So if you have your shot glasses filled and ready, I'll give you a minute. Is there really a war between alien and Bigfoot, or could they be considered the same thing? And I love the sentence that seeming absence of either of them, because it depends on your position. If you're talking about the absence of anything to do with aliens, is it just a mass, not hallucination, but rather the want for the phenomena to exist, that we're pressing upon regular occurrences of anything as being alien? I wonder if that's a good point to make. That's the worst case scenario. It's just all of our imaginations. Number two, of what we do see, if none of it was real, except the US or otherwise created technology, which is far more advanced than what is made public, is shown to the military in other places haphazardly upon being cited by either civilian individuals who end up being ridiculed for coming out having seen it, or domestic aircraft or international aircraft who report seeing these things and then are decommissioned from their roles as pilots because you can't have someone that's so crazy as to see UFOs. So the military pilots that I've spoken to have said, when I asked them, have you seen anything that you would say is unusual? And they said, not that I can tell you, which I think is really extraordinary, which is not a no. And it means yes, but I'm not allowed to tell you because you're not ready in. So that to me suggests two things. One is there is a phenomena out there which exhibits flight characteristics that is beyond what we can make. That's one. Or two, we have made it. It is reverse engineered, or we created it from scratch. And that aliens have never visited here. It's another point. Because we don't know what they are. I believe things are being seen because I've seen some things. I've seen a silver disc off the wing of aircraft I was in. I've also seen up in the sky against a perfectly clear night where there's something appearing to be the shape of a triangle without illumination at all, no illumination at all, no lights on each corner, no big light in the middle, drifted across the sky but was clearly visible and cut the light from the stars out, large enough for it to be not significantly far away or too close, and it was perfectly silent. I've had on the aircraft where I saw the disc off the wing, the flight crew were completely absent in an hour flight where they're usually 100% visible, either going up and down, offering food, or taking back, in an hour. That's all you get. Taking back the rubbish or other cups and saucers and plates and whatever they happen to give out in the first round of going down the aisle. Then they come back collecting it all. And then a second go, and then suddenly landing. There was absolutely no flight crew visible whatsoever. And for me, that was extraordinary, because I'm looking at the thing out the window and it's there like never before and like never again. There it is. And there was no flight crew. Clearly they all knew, and they're all looking out the windows of their respective little areas they were in and just abandoned the public, because who cares, right? Where the passengers, they didn't care. And I wasn't asleep. I was 100% awake, and and yeah, I was sipping the drink that I'd collected. So, anywho, if indeed the secret war between the aliens and Bigfoot was a real thing, then I wonder if the aliens and the Bigfoots then share a technology. It could be a thing. They could both be of the same technological, advantage over us anyway. Or maybe the Bigfoots are the oldest race, or maybe it's the aliens that are the oldest race. Maybe the Bigfoots stole the technology from the aliens. I don't even know. But I have to exclude that the Bigfoots are actually terrestrial, that they live here. I mean, if they did have cloaking technology, then they could live here and we'd never see them, I suppose, or I suspect. Maybe they're interdimensional. Maybe they step in and out. Maybe the aliens step in and out. Maybe they share this location or something similar. Imagine if this planet was in such a good Goldilocks zone. And consider this for a second. The Goldilocks zone around a star is there that you're not too irradiated by the planet's energy or too frozen by the distance away from it, and just right so that you've got liquid, well, so you have water in all three states. All three states mean the stability of the environment for growing food, etc. And there is a like Goldilocks zone around the center of a galaxy. Too close to the middle means you're bombarded perpetually by gamma ray bursts and X-rays and the like. And that would be very bad. Very, very, very bad. It would be non-life sustaining. So outside of a certain perimeter where you have less of this, I would consider that to be the Goldilocks zone in the outer perimeter of a galaxy, rotating around the middle of something, usually a super heavy mass hole, black hole. Super heavy mass is enough. And therefore, in this outer zone, there would be a plethora of life in all of those stars. Maybe the Earth is rarer than we think, with an appropriately sized Earth with a certain amount of gravity in that in a Goldilocks range of gravity, which we don't even think about that in any of our estimations of what would be the ideal place to be. Because if we went to an Earth that was 3 times the size of us right now, we'd all get rather more muscly, because we'd barely be able to stand up. If you weighed, say, I don't know, 100 pounds right now, you'd weigh 200 pounds if it was. So if I said it had twice the mass of Earth, then yes, you would weigh 200 pounds there and 100 pounds here. Saying it was twice the size is actually the square. So that would be 4 times the mass of the Earth if it was only twice physical size. And that would be way too. If you weigh 400 pounds, you'd never get off the ground. You'd never be able to get out of bed. Imagine how tough the springs would have to be on the bed. Throw the ping pong ball at me. Ow! That's like concrete. Just imagine all the stupid things we do today. Yes, we would get used to it, just like we're used to this now. And if we went to the moon, we wouldn't be used to it, but eventually we'd become used to it. Same. And I wonder, with the amount of life, the possibility of life in the galaxy, in our own galaxy, let alone the billions of others. And yes, the distances are great and vast. And if you listen to a debunker, they'll say that, well, they could be all out there, but we'll never know because we can never get there. But that's only anthropomorphizing it. That is suggesting everything in the human scale and the human technology ranges, rather than, well, if you've been here another 1,000, 10,000 or 1,000,000 years, which is completely possible, then you've got to accept that the technology could be so vastly superior to what we have now. Looking at going even back 100 years, what we have today is vastly superior to then. Think about what 1,000,000 years might have achieved, and that they might be able to do layered atomic structures to make elements that we would never have thought even possible. Maybe they can 3D print atoms so that they can create huge, vast sheets of something. Or maybe they just form because you can do it in 0 Gs. That's what I always suspected. We'd end up with some remarkably exotic materials because we made them in Skylab or the ISS. And that's why everyone would want to have their own scientific facility in space to make these unique materials. So one of those unique materials could certainly be something like an anti-gravity propulsion system, where in using a very slight centrifuge, you might be able to layer materials upon each other. Oh man, this cough is so bad. Significantly such to be able to shield oneself from gravity. And I think that that's certainly what would happen. When you think about the descriptions of what was inside the crashed alien craft, having what they call gravity amplifiers, and I'm kind of a little Bob Lazari here because there's very few people that have divulged anything. One of those was the optical fiber everywhere within the sphere of the ship's skin. And I think it's really interesting that you couldn't have copper there because that would induce a magnetic field. You don't get a magnetic field when using fiber optics. And if you could significantly shield all those things that were causing electrons or the photons to be created, then you're sure that it makes perfect sense. You could do that. If we could make those exotic materials, we could make that occur for us. And it has been, I suppose it's been suggested in open media that over time we did get to anti-gravity, but that it was taken from us because we had taken us from by the powers that be, our own powers that be, that they wouldn't want us to have that so soon. That would be, for me, kind of a huge disappointment to not have the natural evolution of materials land at the bottom, because that would make our lives better. And I think that's what Greer had attempted to do, was siphon any possible technology out of the Disclosure Project to be able to patent it as their own within the group and go into production and attempt to make something. But as it stands, it's like monkeys trying to tell each other what a mobile phone is made of. We really don't have any idea. I think that's where we're at. You couldn't reverse engineer a mobile phone because you wouldn't ever make the steps to get to it. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, because at the face value, a mobile phone, it's kind of heavy. It's heavy, it's got glass in it. It's got some round things on the back. You can make something that resembled it, but would it work as it? Probably not. It's got a light in it because it lights up the screen. But how do you make the screen? How do you make the pixels so fine that they're indiscernible from each other? All the steps that we had to go through to get to here, to irradiate ourselves for something like 50 years with CRT screens, shooting electrons through our bodies, is extraordinary. That's something else. We discovered what we had to do with magnets in a pre-tech. Just like steampunk is pre-electricity, you've got to think about, imagine if we never got to anything more than the valve, for instance. Because valves got us televisions. If we could never make silicon chips, if we never got to that point, if that was the peak of our tech, and what happens if we get frozen at the current tech, where we're not given the next step? If we don't get the next step in our hands, what happens then? I wonder. And this, to me, is the big question. We can only ever be frozen at the point at which they decide that we don't want the people at the end, the bottom dwellers, to get this kind of tech. I wonder, because if it were that we were supposed to have anti-gravity, say like at the turn of the century, in the 1900s, that would have been a completely different century. Just think about all the things we've seen in our own science and technology. They're sci-fi shows. Everything that we've dreamt up that is possible. Well, over the last 100 years, we've almost made, fulfilled all of those dreams. We've nearly fulfilled those. And if you go back 200 years, I think we're pretty much there. The Dick Tracy technology when I was growing up, the cartoon show, coming from a comic, he flew in a bin. It looked like a trash can, and he had a watch that had like a TV on it, a video watch. Well, you can buy video watches now, and there's a few early adopters who have smartwatches now that even monitors. Pardon me. It monitors their biorhythms even, as well as their heart rate and blood pressure. It can determine their O2 levels. And there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. And with some software, you can work out what their sleep time is, and when you're at rest and when you're calm. I think that's really, really interesting. That's all in a watch. And how does it talk to anything? Well, it's Bluetooth. Probably the world's worst ever technology, but I'll move on. So you can make phone calls through your phone, through your watch. I think there's a watch with a SIM in it now that you can do the same thing. And we've found that we've made, since we've had quadcopters or octocopters, that's 8 bladed, like, you don't call them drones, because a drone is something that operates on its own. It's just a quadcopter, right? They're self-leveling. There's some really cool intelligence in it to make it stay horizontal to the ground, and you can, just drive it round with a wish list. So this is a fly-by-wire. I want to go left. You push left. It determines what it needs to do to go left. You don't thrust up one side of the pair to make it go laterally. You don't do that. You don't change the blade angle. You don't do anything like that. It works it out and does what you've desired. Now, I think it's really interesting. To go up and down, it has to rev and derev and to change altitude. But to do the yaw and pitch is a complicated set of maths. I even had one had that flip. You could just go flip and it would just flip over. And it would change the rotation of the blades to support itself upside down. That's really, really neat. You could throw it in the air and it would just, wherever it peaked at its trajectory as a ballistic object, it would freeze at that point in air. So you could just throw it up in the air, and on the peak of its curve, it would stop there in the air, and you'd hear all of its math resolving itself to stay there in the air. And that's really cool. With that technology, with the same technology that came from the self-balancing single wheel or double wheel, Segway device, that's just basically keeping you there like you're holding a pool cue from the bottom, with it resting on your finger and you're balancing it. You're just doing that. That's what the math is around keeping a Segway straight up and down. Yeah, it uses a ton of power though. Right? Segway was nice because it had all the batteries down low, the center of balance was nice and low, but still you could injure yourself or others by being a pork chop with it, right? And not really understanding what you had to do. But someone that was skilled on using it, it was like just part of their body. That was like they were connected to it. In the same way that sci-fi has aliens with touchpads, and they don't have levers or anything, they just it's an extension of themselves and their desires. It just works out what they want and it does what they've asked for it. Like a fighter pilot using a control stick. It's not using a control stick that's connected by hydraulics. It's called fly-by-wire. It's not connected to anything that's actually forcefully moving any of the ailerons or flaps or rudder. For instance, it's, even though rudder's with your feet, it's a desire. I want to go that way. And the computer goes, well, to do that, I've got to change these rudder positions here, or these ailerons, and it then navigates the plane to be able to do that kind of thing. So all exactly the same kind of tech. So it would stand to reason that we could do exactly the same thing with something that didn't have propellers. It wasn't a quadcopter. If it was gravity amplification, then it could do that. It could behave in the same way with the same tech we've already created. And that's what's really interesting. So one of the things is, early missiles, when you shot it up in the air, it was good luck with that. Like your fireworks, on fireworks night in whatever respective country that you might happen to be in, whether it's in the US with the 4th of July. There's no automatic steering that occurs on one of those. It's only thrust and drag that allows it to go in a particular direction to the best of its ability. The thrust, there's no thrust vectoring. Thrust, hoping that the curvature of the output is enough for the expansion of the gas to get the maximum flow rate, and thrust for it to go in the direction you hope it to go in. So if you've ever made one yourself, you know that you've got to do that right. In a missile, one of the things they first learnt, this is militarily by the way, was to steer it, to make it go vertically and not just, spin left or spin right and then land back where it took off from, because that's a real challenge. And it uses gyros and stability arms to move those little like rods to move the little fins near the tail is what it does. So it changes the balance somewhat because of the actual physical tipping of the machine. It moves some rods, which changes the angle of something, just keeping it light. And now that's mechanically driven. This way of being able to do it with a non-moving part that can determine G-forces, then to be able to counter those G-forces and do it at once, that is magical coding. Even though it's as simple as now, and we have devices and we just produce them and it doesn't matter, and you can build them in your own code, right? You can build in your own circuits now, and you can just buy a little part, put on your plane, and you can know everything. That is really neat. My phone has one. So my phone has the ability to determine whether it's speeding up or slowing down. So it's using G-force detection. So if I lose a signal and I'm being directed by a GPS, thank you very much, Amiga. I've got 10 minutes left. So if you're driving along and you lose, say you go into a tunnel and there's no more, signal from the satellites, then my phone will detect whether I've sped up or slowed down. It still makes an estimate based on that, how much acceleration for how long, and then it determines how fast then that should be going. And it can still work all that out. I think that's just wonderful that we can work this stuff out. I want the next step. Where's my elephant? No, where's my hoverboard? Where's my hover car? I do want it. I think we need that exotic material. There was an exotic material that I saw a demonstration of, which was, it used to be on the internet, but YouTube and all the things, and it's just gone. They delete someone's account, you can't get access to it. I remember I had a link to the clip, and it's gone, the channel's gone, everything's gone. And it was an exotic material that was used to insulate from magnetic forces, from magnetism. So what it was was a non-metal magnetic insulator, and that would mean so much to our life if just something as simple as that was discovered. Now, whether or not it was fraud or not is, since I never got to see it in actual action, in real, like in the flesh, I never got to see it or touch it. I think it was a Russian dude who'd made it, and it's a shame that seems to have disappeared, because with that you could quite literally make a water wheel out of magnets that would run forever. And the thing that cancels out because there's no such thing as a monopole magnet, the monopole is effectively being created by insulation. And then therefore you could have something that was constantly repelling, just like a water force on a water wheel. It's constantly providing a force on it. And that would have been really nice if we had something like that. We could have all had unlimited power for the rest of our lives, because it wouldn't matter anymore. But the people who sell us power, the last thing they would want to do was have us with power that they couldn't sell to us. And well, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy that they've taken it away, because maybe it didn't really exist. And that's like over unity power generation that may or may not have ever existed. But it would be an interesting concept if it were to have existed, where you could continually amplify power with no loss for some reason. And therefore, starting with a AA battery, you could end up with millions of volts and millions of amps, because you could put them in parallel. I just wonder how crazy the world could be if we had just the simplest of inventions in that regard. Surely there's an exotic material that can do this. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to bake it. Don't know. But from what it looked like, it kind of looked like it was aluminium with some kind of carbon in it. But I don't know. I really don't know. And if there's any scientists that ever listen to this ever and are close or are thinking of it, do it. Just do it. But don't tell anyone. You want to sell it first to the military, and at least you get 25 years grace, or go immediately public, and therefore you're safe or safer. Because I think that's the thing, when Stanley Meyer came out with his water-powered car, and his water-powered car drove with a film crew across the US. It was like a VW Beetle with instead of like a dune buggy, but with the VW subframe and an engine, but rather there was a large stainless steel box, and they only ever poured water into it. And this was noted and filmed by the crew who followed him. And then he ran out at a point later. He ran out of a restaurant, having meant to have been in negotiations with the military. He said, "I've been poisoned," and fell to the ground dead outside the restaurant. That's like rain coming from the station. Never mind. Hopefully it's not underwater. Yeah, so look, if you were to make anything, and don't promote yourself with it unless it's a full media presentation with all the media being presented there, because you really do need to self-preservate, because I can't imagine that any of the big companies that provide us for huge profits, there's wonderful services that we know and love, like electricity, or petrol or gasoline. You don't want those people to feel threatened by the thing that you've created. Because what would Saudi Arabia be without gasoline production? It'd be a desert. And that's right, they wanted to build 160 kilometers, say 100 mile long, was it 10-story building covered in glass, like mirror surface, and build a city with a super high speed rail system in it and have it totally self-contained. 100 miles long, dead straight in the desert. For some reason, they better hurry up. Because that's just going to be a pipe dream if we ended up in a conflict anyway in the world. I wonder what Saudi Arabia would do in a conflict. To sell fuel to everyone participating? Would they take sides, I wonder? How would that go down? Wow, there's a thought and a half. But, it's nearly 4 o'clock, 4 a.m. Here it's almost 6 p.m. on a Sunday. And we're coming up to the end of the show. And I'd like to say thank you to all those people who held on for Dave's stingy, what was it called again? The Stingy and Battery Show, which is Crusted Clown, 72 hours continuously. That's kind of what it felt like tonight with my brain fog from my old coronavirus. Avoid coronavirus, by the way, people. Do that for your own safety. Because if you're the only person in the world who ends up not ever having it, and everyone else dies as a result of having it through complication later on in life, because we still don't know what's going to happen, then you'll be the winner. I think you get the prize. You get the whole world to yourself when that happens. So do try and stay away from it. And it's probably the same reason why China is trying to have no one get infected by it. They're really attempting to have 0 cases. They're still on that march towards 0 cases. So what is the outcome? I think only time will tell. So look, this has been another tremendous Shiny Side Out with just Dave going crazy on his own without Meki. And hopefully next week Meki will be back. And that will be episode 542. 542. I can't believe it's this is the 11th year. We've done 10. And if anyone out there is willing to sponsor us, that would be fantastic. I don't mean individuals. I mean a company with products. That'd be good. Because I'll do feature bits with them. By the way, just letting you know, shameless promotion. Oh, and the last point to make: if you've ever caught the show Neighbours, and it was an Australian TV show, it's finally over. Crowd goes wild. England, the whole of England, I can hear them sighing in despair that they no longer have Neighbours TV show. Anyway, take care. Coming up next is Jer Bear's After Hours show, which is always great. You should dial in and talk to him on air. Anyway, you avoided talking to me on air, and I'll catch you guys next week for Shiny Side Out. Catch you on Tuesday and Thursday nights for Plato's Cave as well. And until then, have a great week.